Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Business Solutions Academy by JD Young Technologies. My name is Ken Lane, and in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the potentially devastating effects of ransomware attacks on businesses and organizations, where they originate, and what you can do to protect yourself. So, to do this, we're speaking with Damon Doremus. Damon is the Chief Information Officer at JD Young Technologies and heads up the Managed Network Services Division. So, for all of those of you joining us in video form or via podcast episode, there's no need to take any notes, as we'll be publishing a full transcript of this conversation. You can look in the description information of this episode for a link to the corresponding article in our very helpful resource center at jdyoung.com/resource-center. Damon, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Damon, the city of Tulsa, as it's been in the news, they recently received a ransomware attack. So, firstly, what is a ransomware attack exactly?
So ransomware is software that gets installed on computers, servers, desktops. It can even be on mobile phones. And typically what it does is it encrypts your files or encrypts the operating system, in some cases the entire device. That's more like lockerware. But ransomware is a scenario where it encrypts the files and makes it so that you cannot access the data, you cannot access the files without a key or a passcode. And then of course, in this case, we would call them pirates. They're holding your data hostage, right? And unless you pay them, or unless you have the ability to unencrypt the files in some other way, which you wouldn't be able to do without the passcode, well, then they hold you hostage, and so therefore it's called ransomware.
Okay, so what happened during the city of Tulsa ransomware attack of spring of 2021?
So we don't exactly know, and it's unlikely that they're ever going to really tell us exactly, 1, 2, 3, what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we probably don't want to give more information than we need to. However, more often than not, ransomware unfortunately comes in from a user interaction. A user receives an email, typically a phishing email, asking them to do something. And that do something is typically install some software or give up another password to someplace else. And so phishing is a broad term that's used. Usually in ransomware, you have a spear phishing scenario where the bad guys look for someone who would likely have administrative access into systems that would be, valuable to them. And they'll send an email to that individual or individuals they think might be in the org that might have those types of permissions, and try to get them to do something that they shouldn't, sort of a bait and switch kind of scenario, right? And then once they're in, it's also pretty common that they sit there and wait, and they monitor and see what's going on in the network to see what targets are higher than others. And then once they've got it figured out, a good map of what's going on inside the network, then they go ahead and start encrypting the files. So, from an IT perspective, it's extremely difficult in that lots of users do need administrative access in order to be able to install some software. Some software requires administrative access just for it to run, and that's really poor programming, but it exists out there. We all have to deal with that.
Okay. Well, how is it that an entity as prominent as the city of Tulsa could have been victim to a ransomware attack? How would that happen?
So we're all unfortunately targets, and the city of Tulsa, or really any organization that has lots of information and needs access to it really quickly, is a higher target, right? Pipelines have been in the news of late. Obviously, municipalities are a good example of that. And just because they're a large outfit and their IT department is probably very well run. In fact, how they got back up so quickly is probably to really good documentation and good IT management on their part. But they're still a massive target because they have lots of information, and they would be hurt by being down for a long period of time.
Okay, you mentioned something about them being a key target because they probably hold a lot of information. So What kinds of industries or organizations do you see are the most susceptible to ransomware attacks, if attackers really discriminate much at all?
Well, you're right. To date, they haven't really discriminated a lot. It's been more of a shotgun approach, but we're starting to see much more targeted scenarios. And targeted scenarios can be financial, legal, obviously healthcare. Anything that allows them to expand their reach and get more victims, unfortunately. So, really, honestly, anybody that has access to PII, financial information, any scenario where they can spread further, you're going to be a target.
Goodness. So what are some of the first steps that a company and organization should take immediately following a ransomware attack?
So the first, obviously, is to talk to your IT department. If you don't have an IT department, well, then you want to talk to whoever your outsourced IT department is. And, if you don't have either one of those, well, we provide that, by the way. So that would be helpful. But, the obvious things is start unplugging access to the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the infection to go further than it already has. And if you catch it early enough and you have the ability to restore from backup, the damage may be limited. Unfortunately, we're seeing that more often than not, they've gotten in sometime in the past and they've been lurking in the background. So, running over real fast and unplugging the router is a great idea, but it may be too late. It just depends on the level of the infection and how long they've been there.
It's kind of a tourniquet on a snake bite type of approach.
It can be, absolutely. Because really, truthfully, there is no silver bullet against ransomware other than restoring from backup. We can put in amazing software that filters how applications run. We can put in antivirus software, anti-malware software. We can do phishing training for our end users, which we provide that for free for our managed service customers, by the way. And I think that's honestly more valuable than any antivirus software because, it's the smell test. If you receive something in the email and looks like it's asking you to do something that doesn't make a lot of sense, smells fishy, well, chances are it's bad, right? And we're all so busy that we just click because we're all so busy trying to get everything done. So, regardless of all this technology that we put in place, at the end of the day, unfortunately, usually it's just a quick mistake that, nobody really meant with any malice. It happened, right? So really training is definitively the best thing to be able to circumvent this. And then, as before, there's no silver bullet. Restoring from backup.
So almost retraining behaviors is almost just as essential as any kind of antivirus or something like that.
It absolutely is. Yes.
Okay. So what are a few things that businesses and organizations can do right now to help prevent ransomware attacks? We had just spoken about behavioral shifts and all that. So
obviously training and obviously antivirus and we look at all IT security as a layered approach, right? So it starts with a firewall and then starts going all the way to the end user. And the end user is the ultimate firewall, right? I mean, the end user is picking and choosing what to do is at the end of the day, the end of that long string of all these layered approaches. But starting with a firewall, then we might have filtering in place for email. We might have antivirus. We might have anti-malware. We might have our NOC and SOC and SIEM services that are also looking at the computers on a regular basis, looking for, activity that looks suspicious. So doing all of those things, again, as a layered approach, good passwords. If you're not using two-factor authentication on anything that you possibly can use, you should be. People frequently think of email as not something that they need to secure, but it all starts with email, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't have two-factor authentication turned on for your email client, you should do so immediately. And really anything else that you have the ability to turn two-factor on, you should do it. And that's going to stop a lot of it.
Okay. So we got two-factor, behavioral changes, probably just certain backup programs. So how else can business and organizations best protect themselves going forward from ransomware attacks over the long term?
So again, there's no silver bullet other than restoring from backup. So, we frequently make errors in thinking about what backup is. So it's common that people say, okay, well, I've got a hard drive. I've got a little USB hard drive that's connected to my computer. That's a backup. Well, sure it is, but if you get hit with ransomware, it's going to encrypt that backup because it's connected to your computer. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't really a backup. So in our world, we don't consider data to really exist until it's in three places. So on the local drive that you're already working on, right? Then maybe to a backup drive that's physically connected, or say a network attached storage that's connected to the computer, and then offsite someplace. Obviously we would prefer it to be offsite encrypted at our data centers, but really, even if it was offsite in a medium that was not connected to the internet, say a USB flash drive that was password protected, and it was at grandma's house, that's okay too, right? Because we have three different scenarios of our backup. We've got the real world example, then we've got an immediate near-term backup, and then we've got an offsite backup. And that offsite backup in the near term, we're essentially creating what we call a versioned backup, right? And so our managed services plan actually puts in even more robust versioning of backups, where we could go back, an hour ago, 15 minutes ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, right? So if there's a scenario of a ransomware attack, we could go backwards in time to what we consider to be known good and be able to restore files. So, businesses, even home users, just keep in mind that a backup only really exists if it's in three places.
Awesome. Well, that was immensely informative. Thanks, Damon, for making the time to chat with us today. For those of you guys tuning in, if you learned something new today and feel that others could benefit from this information as well, we always appreciate that thumbs up on YouTube and hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss any other helpful episodes, as well as sharing this with your friends on social media. So if you'd like to learn more about cybersecurity threats or any other business solutions related topics, you're invited to check out our resource center at jdyoung.com/resource-center, or you can search for Business Solutions Academy by JD Young Technologies on your favorite podcast player. So thanks a lot, Damon, and everyone else. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much. See ya.